Good evening and welcome to the November 15th, 2022 Town Council workshop for Weaverville, North Carolina. Tonight is an opportunity, mostly we've in workshops, it's an opportunity for council to learn from each other and from others and to learn about issues. And tonight we are discussing several of the recommendations that were made to council with regard to our water system. And we want to report out tonight on some of the progress that we've made in that effort, and also hopefully make some decisions that are listed under item number 5 on the agenda. Since we're trying to be very focused this evening, I am glad that all town councils have read this large packet, and hopefully you have had a chance to as well. There's a lot of information, a lot of data in it, so therefore we're going to try to go through it relatively quickly and get to the action items. Everyone on council assures me they've read it and memorized it and are ready to take the test, so I think we should be okay. So first we want to review the action plan for the water system, and I'm going to ask the town manager to give us an overview, but I have asked him not to go into all the great detail, but to cover the highlights, the main points. So, Selena?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor, and good evening to all of you. It's good to see you. Beginning on page 3, you have the action plan that is based on the resolution that you approved back at the end of June, June 27th to be exact. So I'm going to go through these very quickly. Actually, stop and refer to the mayor here. We'll get to number 3, just to let you know and to give everyone who's with us tonight physically as well as remotely the opportunity to hear where we are. The first item is to implement water supply resiliency improvements as soon as possible. As you all know, we did submit an application. Initially, we just a couple months ago heard that we did not receive the funding for this from the Drinking Water State Revolving Fund. We did resubmit though, and so we have to hear from them, from the state folks, regarding our application, our new application, by February. Number 2 is pending, and that is the development of a conservation-minded water rate structure. That is, of course, pending a number of items as far as where town council wishes to go with the remainder of the elements of this action plan that we'll go through as we move along. Number 3, I will refer to the mayor to report back on a meeting that we had with all of the jurisdictions that we have been referencing in our regional approach. So, Mr. Mayor, if you want to give that back.
So Selena and I participated in a Zoom conference this afternoon with representatives from Mars Hill, Madison County, and the town of Marshall. And the town marshal, I think, had 3 council persons and the mayor present, as Mars Hill had the mayor and the town manager, and 1 county commissioner showed up and 1 failed to show. But anyway, a good representation from all the interested parties. And we talked about the possibility of working together because we all have water challenges and we all are experiencing a lot of growth and development. So we agreed that trying to find some way to have a cooperative regional approach to the solution seemed like a good idea. And we are all going to meet in person on November the 30th and try and make a decision then. What we talked about, though, as the plan would be to approach our persons in the General Assembly, because General Assembly still has a lot of money. The state is very flush with cash right now, and we'd like to approach them to fund this activity being building a water plant and sharing it, with all the different municipalities. So everyone is generally in agreement, and we're going to make a specific direction at our meeting on November the 30th. So I think it was a fairly positive meeting. Okay, so we then move to page 4. 4, 5, and 6 are in direct reference to our connection with Marshall, our connection with Woodfin, and a connection with and so what we're going to do at this point is we're going to skip over to page 6, and we're going to take a look. I'm just going to hit some highlights here because you all have had this since Thursday. So I'm going to hit some highlights. So this first one, and I'll ask that we move the presentation forward to page 6, showing the map here. Okay, so this is the interconnection with Mars Hill.
We've talked about this a number of times, so I don't want to belabor the issues, but I do want to make sure that we hit the highlights. So we have talked about before in the past about having a connection, a bidirectional connection with Morse Hill. And at one point in time, we didn't think we had that. That was until our Public Works Director, Dale Panel, went out and took a look at the situation there with the connection, and we actually do have a bidirectional connection. If you look at the bottom of the page there on page 6, you'll see an actual picture of that connection between the town of Weaverville and the town of Morse Hill. So that is as simple as flipping the switch, essentially, in order to provide us and for us to provide them with emergency water. So with this one, if just skipping down to emergency water, the section on emergency water, you'll see that there's no capital improvements needed for this to happen. What does need to happen, though, is that we need to re-up the agreement that we have, or an agreement, it's not the same agreement, that we had before with the town of Morse Hill, which ended and expired in 2015. And so we have presented the town of Morse Hill with a draft of this agreement. And you'll find that agreement, we'll go through that here in just a moment, because you do have a copy of that in your packet. So we do need a new intergovernmental agreement. This would give us the opportunity to have emergency water. Morse Hill does not have enough capacity to provide us with supplemental water. They essentially have said that to us. By the way, let me say to you that on these data sheets that I'm sharing here with you, these have all been verified by the jurisdictions that we have been working with. We've had numerous meetings with these folks, so these documents have been verified. This document specifically for Morse Hill, and as we move forward, we put this document, and you'll see also the document. So again, we can have emergency water with the execution of an intergovernmental agreement with Morse Hill, but not supplemental water, because they do not have that capacity to provide that to us. So let's go ahead and we'll just keep the map up, but as we're turning pages here, you see the intergovernmental agreement. Again, this has been sent to Morse Hill. The manager has reviewed it, has indicated that he is happy with it the way it is. There's a place that we want to fill in some blanks. And he is actually planning on having the document before his board at their December meeting so that they can review and sign off on it. So that is one of the things that we'll be asking you to do tonight, is to take action on this intergovernmental agreement so that we'll be that much closer to clicking off all of the items that were in your resolution from the end of June. So if you look on page 9, and I'm not going to go through these because you have had the opportunity to look at them, but if you will look at page 9 with the short-term emergency water needs, this basically lays out what each party, both Morse Hill as well as Weaverville, will be providing with regard to short-term emergency water needs. Then we move on to page 10. You'll see that the cost of the service, this would be basically the cost, our cost. We would submit our cost as what they would pay, and they would do the same if we were in need of emergency water. That is if we use it. So just signing the agreement to say that we agree to provide emergency water costs us nothing. Because all of the equipment is in place. There's no capacity fees, there's no fees like that. We would only be paying for consumption if we need emergency water.
So it'd be a pass-through at that.
That's correct. Okay. That's correct.
Quick question, Selena. With that connection, is it going to be necessary to do flushing of the lines periodically, or how will it work?
We have been flushing the lines on an as needed basis there, so we would need to flush the lines and make sure that everything worked well periodically, yes. But that's as simple as us, as our staff.
Okay.
Yes, sir.
So just to make sure I understand correctly, the emergency water need would be both ways.
That's correct.
Supplemental water would be one way only to Marcel.
We would be agreeing. We're not agreeing with supplemental water in this intergovernmental agreement.
Okay, all right,
This is only for the use of emergency water.
all right.
So if you look, let's see, under cost of services, third paragraph, need you to fill in the blank there. You should have Morris Hill's volume charges based on units of blank. They have let us know that 1,000 gallons, which is the same for us, should be the amount that is there. And then on the very next sentence, each party shall have the right to adjust its mark out wholesale, that should be emergency water rate on an annual basis. So what I will do is recommend to you as we come into this budget year, I would make a recommendation to you with regard to what the annual rate would be based on our costs. It would be purely a pass-through. We, as you all know, we are not in the business of making profit. Government is not in the business of making profit, and we would not be adding any markup except what it would be as far as our cost goes.
And that could be, that could be a rate set on your fee schedule each year.
So then we move on to page 15. This takes us to, if we can advance our slide to page 17 there, which shows us our Asheville and Weaverville. Okay. So this one is really important because we've had a lot of conversation, town council has had a lot of conversation about the potential for purchasing Asheville water. The short of it is, yes, we can, if we want to spend $17 million or $14 million. So that information is right in front of you. So let's go ahead and we'll start with the fact that the connection, there is an interconnection, but it is not operable. And Asheville has said they will not make it operable. So there's no indication from Asheville that they'll use our previous interconnection that was last operable in 2011. It is currently closed, it's locked, and like I said, they have said they will not agree to open it without the improvements that we're going to talk about next. So what that tells us and what they have confirmed is that we have no option at this point in time of either emergency water from them or supplemental water from them. So we go down the second half of the page there on 15, in supplemental water. If we go with up to 2 million gallons per day, we're going to be in a position to replace a vault, upgrade around 2 lines of existing Asheville transmission line. And these lines are down in Woodfin, basically, from Elkwood Avenue up to our connection point. Install a new pump station, and then upgrade some of our lines for 3 miles, around about 3 miles. And this would be a 4 to 5 year project. And total cost, again, cost estimates as of today, $17 million. If we're looking at next month, who knows? We all know what the economy is doing and how inflation is impacting everything. One other thing I think is really important that we talk about here, if you'll look at footnote 3, because I've noticed a number of folks talk about the ease in moving Asheville water to Weaverville. The flow pressures are going to fluctuate. And at this point in time, we can't really measure that, but the flow pressures, if you look at, again, footnote number 3, they're going to do, those are going to fluctuate based on pumping operations on the Asheville side. So we would have to wait and determine, maybe do some modeling in order to determine where we go with that. Okay, so that covers 2 million, the 2 million gallons per day, or up to, excuse me. So the next page, page 16, we're going to focus let's concentrate on, you have the information in front of you for maximum capacity. But I think it would be best for us, given that we're trying to look at apples to apples and look at potential of expanding our own plant versus what we would get from Asheville. So let's look at the top section first, and that's the moderate capacity. And so what that would gain us is 1.5 million gallons per day. It would double our current capacity. And our estimated cost then would be the capital costs that we talked about earlier. But also, let's not let go of the fact that we've got some minimum cost here and we've got some maximum. So let's take a look at under maximum, we would have to pay, and again, these numbers have been confirmed by Asheville for now. These numbers can change with their next budget, obviously. But we would have to pay a roughly $27,000 per month or $330,000 annually, in addition to a meter fee, which would bring us to about $3,000 annually, and then a maximum usage would bring us to $917,000, roughly $918,000 per year. So that is what we would need to pay annually in addition to the capital costs.
When that adds up, I'm sorry.
Oh, no, that's all right, you go ahead.
So, go ahead.
Thank you.
All right, so my question is, none of this is in the rates that go to the user, that these costs.
No, and when you look at it from that standpoint, you'll see why we're not really ready to go into doing a rate structure at this point in time, because we really need a lot of answers before we even try to get there.
Yes.
So essentially what, we're looking at roughly $1 million annual costs just for the consumption piece. Go ahead.
That's what I was gonna look back to
Okay.
get that total.
So I think one thing that, actually, I think it's probably a good time to talk about what we were discussing today. Jennifer and I sat down today, took a look at, just to, from the standpoint of, what would that be on your, if this were tax rate? Okay, remember this is the water fund, so it's completely separate from the general fund. But if that was our tax rate, that's the equivalent of 18 cents on our tax rate annually. For that annual fee for water from the city of Asheville. So again, please don't anybody misconstrue that, or anybody that's on Zoom take that we're increasing taxes. But that just gives you an idea. That is significant
an order
for
of
our
magnitude.
budget.
It's like an order of magnitude of,
Absolutely.
yeah, get it.
Absolutely. So then, and so that's moderate, okay? So then we go down and we take a look at the max capacity, bumping up from 1.5 to 2 million. And that would require a change in our meter to an 8-inch meter, and would give us a total capacity of 3.5 million, basically. And then again, I won't belabor it, but then again, you look at these amounts that we would be paying based on the annual amount. So emergency water is very important because it's still going to require a significant capital expense by the town. And again, what we've estimated is 14 million for the vault replacement, which would still be required by the city, an upgrade of the 2 ± 2 miles of line, and then it would be a 3 to 5 year project. And then, of course, you see the amounts that we would have to pay for emergency water alone. But I think it's really important to note, and this was kind of an eye-opener for all of us staff when we were meeting with the city. Unfortunately, we had all thought that we had the capacity to gain emergency water from the city today. We don't. And I'll tell you, that scares me specifically for the fact of we do not have redundancy, resiliency in place at our treatment plant right now. And it concerns me because we don't have those generators in place. We don't have things in place to give us a level of security. Now, we do have the Marseille. If you sign the agreement, we do have that, that emergency water capacity. But it really leaves us in a tough spot because we do not actually have, even if we decide, if you all decided to go with the City of Asheville Water, we do not have the equipment in place, nor will they approve it until we make these changes. That's from them directly.
Selena, do you know if
Yes.
the rates, all these costs from Asheville, does this represent pass-through, wholesale from them? Is this user rates they're passing through? Do we know?
Is there a wholesale rate?
Okay.
What about for emergency, they're saying plus 10%?
Plus 10%, yep.
So
Wholesale
they're
rate plus
looking at making a profit on this.
Yeah.
I don't think for emergency that would be
Well,
proper.
and I'll tell you another really important thing, if you take a look at the map, what you see is the vast majority of what they're asking us to install is not in the town of Weaverville. So we would actually be installing vaults and pump stations in line, in the town of Woodfin. And those lines would be used by anybody else. Not just us. They would not be specifically town of Weaverville lines. They would be used by anybody that the city of Asheville allowed to hook on.
As a matter of fact, they would be Asheville lines that they're asking us to upgrade.
Okay, so moving along, let's go to page 18 and let's advance our slide to page 20. So this is Woodfin. We have spent some time getting some information from Woodfin. And their current director, they have now, it's our understanding, have hired a new person to be their director. I'll also preface all of the information that you have before you, in front of you on Woodfin has not been approved by their board, the Woodfin Water Board, nor has it been approved by the new director for the Woodfin Water District. But it's some good information in that we've spent a lot of time and really taken a deep and hard look at what we could reasonably receive from the Woodfin Water District. So let's look at the bottom third. I'm going to start there. You have the information on lines 1 and 2, distribution lines there. And those are shown on the map that's on the screen. But the interconnection between Weaverville and the Woodfin Water District was last operable 20 years ago. And it's long since been disconnected. So there's really not a connection there. And it's kind of hard to delineate what's there and what's not, but as of right now, that line is not operable. And we have no agreement, as you know, with the Woodfin Water District. The interconnection between Asheville and Woodfin Water District was operable. It is operable. Hold on. Interconnection is operable and an interlocal agreement in place that allows Woodfin to receive water from Asheville. They have an agreement, I believe it's set to expire, it's here somewhere, 2029 or 2030, okay, 2029, whereby they can purchase 1 million gallons per day. They're using half of that. So there is some potential there. Again, their district board has not approved this, but there's some potential there that we could have some supplemental or emergency water through that system. The town is not able to get water from Woodfin District unless we do undertake a capital project, which is we start talking about on page 19. For emergency water, up to 250,000 gallons per day, this would require vault installation, valve replacement, and some reconfiguration. Also, some obvious easements, permitting, those are basically the things that would need to happen in order to get this in place. These estimated costs would be around about 600,000. Again, just estimates there. Going with the 500,000 gallons per day, we would be looking at vault installation at the 2 connection points that you see on the map there in red. And as well as the valve replacement and reconfigurations. We're looking at about a 1 to 2 year project again, and roughly 750,000. The notes on this one are very important. So if you'll take a look at those, the capacity estimates on this information. Again, I'm going to keep saying that because we don't want to get in the position where our numbers are thrown out and people use them and we haven't had the opportunity to truly get our best cost estimation. So again, these are have not been committed by anyone. Available flow would need to be confirmed by Woodfin. They would want to do some hydraulic modeling of their water sources to make sure that they could provide us with this water. They haven't done that. They would need to take on that task next. And again, they would need to look at, just like we would, if we were giving water, just like we do when we're giving water to folks. We have to look at our projections for future demands. For instance, if there are projects that happen in the Gill Branch area where they do have water, you know, they would have to include those kinds of projects in their future projections. And they would just make the determination based on what their future demands would be as to how much water they could sell to us. So I think that's where we are. Woodfin hasn't, I guess one last thing, Woodfin really hasn't given us an idea of what their rate would be for us to purchase or for consumption. But we do at least have our ideas about what the capital cost would be for that. 2029, good, thank you. So that Jennifer was just sharing with me that the agreement between Asheville and Woodfin is set to expire in 2029.
Selena, the emergency only option, the 2 flavors right now are, Mars Hill and Woodfin. Taking aside cost, is there any difference in the capabilities of doing emergency with either party?
I don't think so, unless there are some technical aspects that I'm not aware of. I'm looking at Randall and Dale. Do you know of anything that would be, that would make Mars Hill versus Woodfin, one would be better than the other, or?
I mean, hopefully never have to use it, but if we
Right.
did, is there
That's a good question.
is it a jump ball or?
Well,
If you're good.
I guess the difference would be in the description of what constitutes emergency water. I think the way the agreement has been worded, it's intended to be for a very short-term situation. Major water line breaks, and so they need water, or there's a major fire, or they need extra water.
Right.
So Mars Hill right now has an 800,000 gallon a day plant they're using in the high 300,000s. But they've got several large projects that are already in the works. So a couple of subdivisions that are partly built, and a large $20 million expansion on the Mars Hill University campus that's going to take another large chunk of their water. So from the standpoint of the available supply, Mars Hill in an emergency situation, meaning just days of time, has adequate water. But if it went a little beyond that, or was a more extended emergency period, Then Asheville, of course, has millions of gallons of water, and therefore Woodfin has, the ability to tap onto 1 million gallons a day and be able to provide us then with, 500,000 or so. So to answer your question, short term, a few days, there's probably no difference in those two connections, but if the emergency lasted for a long period of time, Asheville might have a little bit of a leg up.
Got it. Thank you.
The other thing I would emphasize is that when the agreement, the interlocal agreement between Woodfin and Asheville ends, we don't know if the amount will change. My assumption would be that Asheville would be open to increasing that amount for Woodfin. But we don't know, simply don't know the answer to that.
I have a question. I'm assuming that Woodfin is also having to pay those monthly and annual fees to Asheville, which in turn probably get passed to us.
Yes.
A proportion of, depending on our demand.
Yes, and just to note though, those fees were set 20
Yes.
years ago. So in my best guess, they've probably gotten a real bargain.
Yes.
Yeah, that agreement was put in place in 2005, 2004 to 2005, and so that predates a lot of the new fees that I think City of Asheville is putting in place.
And would their agreement with Asheville allow them to pass water outside of their district?
Yes, they essentially buy the water. It's then considered Woodfin water.
I am finished with my section. I think Jennifer is up next.
Well, I think it makes sense, instead of discussing our options, Nick, since item number 4, I think is part of those options, why don't we cover item number 4, which is the river study for the Ivy River, and then come back to item 3. Does that make sense?
Back to the summary.
Right. So if you could tell us about the Ivy River water study.
Be happy to do that. Town council has been very interested, I believe, in determining the true viability and reliability of water coming from the Ivy River. We've obviously heard from a number of folks that have attended meetings saying that there's not, in case of drought or some other instance, that there's not going to be enough water available down the Ivy, and have you indicated that you're interested in looking into that further. So what we did was reach out to a company, we're sideways there, a company that we were aware of that has done some work for the City of Asheville on the Mills River end of their plant or their system, and as well as a number of other jurisdictions that you see there across North Carolina. And then also on page 23, you see the number of towns and cities and water districts that work for in South Carolina, doing various studies. But one of the things that we found, staff found interesting about them, is they have done these reliable yield studies. And so what we found is a number of, you have engineering firms that do the PERs and those types of things, but we haven't been able to find many that would actually do a study like this. And Jennifer spent some time talking with the folks at CDM Smith, sharing with them what we were looking for and what we would expect to achieve, and shared with them basically that town council is interested in ensuring that the Ivy River is a viable source for the future. That you don't want to go make rash decisions about potential expansions or any improvements that would lead to drawing more water out of the Ivy River, unless you feel comfortable that it's the right thing to do and it's good for that it's okay with the Ivy River, and that we're not harming anyone that lives on the Ivy or uses water off the Ivy, or the plants or the little critters that are in the water on the Ivy River. So this group is very familiar with that. They actually performed this kind of study for the city of Asheville, the Mills River portion of their system. And in talking to them and reviewing the information they've provided us, we feel comfortable presenting this to you and asking you to if you would have action tonight allowing us to execute the agreement with them, which starts on page 25 of your packet here, and you see the information. Now, this is what they sent us, so I'm not going to spend a whole lot of time on it, but I did find it interesting that on data collection and analysis, they're not just drawing data from one source. They're getting their data from a number of sources, including the USGS, including information from the town, information from DEQ. Working, they're accustomed to this. They've worked with DEQ on other projects like this and to do reports, and so they're very comfortable with that. They're also looking at, if you look at task number 4, they're looking at future climate projections. I found that very interesting and positive for us that they're looking down the line and they're looking at potentials. We've heard folks mention that in the future we might have problems and we might have droughts and those kinds of things. So they have ways of doing modeling that will look at those kinds of things. And really, I thought was really great is that they have projected that they could have a product, even if it's in draft format, in 5 weeks for us. And I think a lot of that is because they're familiar with our area, but they're also very familiar and efficient in the way that they're doing the report. So they have, it's not cheap to have this done. It's $29,800. But I believe it rises this project and the town's water source, along with folks that live on the Ivy. I think it's important that we give strong consideration to this, and I would recommend that town council allow us to go ahead and execute this contract and have them begin to work.
And the time frame to complete the study is 5 weeks approximately, correct?
Yes.
Yeah, I'm kind of excited about this, only if that's the right word, water, but that, this is something that we all talked about, and the folks at the Ivy brought up very good points about the fact that we were going on certifications that occurred many, many years ago that were well done, but there's a leap of faith there, and we need to have objective data if we're going to look at supplemental water coming from the Ivy or anywhere else. And the fact that these folks do it, and I kind of like the fact that it's a different engineering firm than one we've been using too, for a number of reasons. So if we recommend going ahead, which I certainly would, it becomes a gate that in 5 weeks we'll know, okay, can we keep going on the path we're on supplemental water or not? And then that's going to help guide us with these other options pretty quickly.
Mm-hmm.
It'd be really good to have it recertified in our lifetime,
Yes.
Right.
Can we take a motion and a vote on that particular item?
We can, if you'd like at this point, Doug. We actually, council members, if you would look at what we need to do is 4 decisions tonight, decisions A through D under agenda item number 5. And what you do is one of those. So we could do that now, or we
Yeah.
could.
In the total scope of things, for what's exposed, I think 29,000 is a very reasonable figure to get these questions answered up front. It kind of holds up everything else, so I would be willing to make the motion that we move forward on this if it's appropriate.
Including the budget amendment that's needed.
Yeah.
So there's a motion and a second to proceed with the river reliable yield study. Are there any more discussion about that item? If not, all in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed? One down. Thank you, folks. So you've heard now from the manager, and you've had the opportunity to read all this data and all these studies. Before we go into the decision making, are there any other questions the council members would like to ask of the staff
Did you want to circle back to page 21?
If you'd like, page 21 is the graph that compares all of the various costs. So looking at packet item 21, that gives you a quick view of what these very different options, what these various options would cost and related information.
If I could just make a couple very brief comments on this page. There are the one-time costs that are the capital expenditures that will need to be made for these various options. But there is also that annual cost that you have to consider. And where it's very relevant is when you really start looking at the city of Asheville, their capital projects is roughly $3 million cheaper than an expansion of the water treatment plant. But when you look at any moderate level of capacity to buy that water from Asheville, really the Weaverville expansion will pay for itself over that Asheville option pretty quickly. If you're looking at 1.5 million gallons per day, it pays for itself over about 4 years. So again, so when you're thinking about those costs, know that that annualized cost is a big deal.
The other thing to totally think about when you're considering the Asheville one is that it is not Weaverville water lines. It's still Asheville water lines owned by Asheville, used by Asheville. We're still just a customer that can be cut off anytime and disappointed at any time, and price increases at any time.
And not just any customer, the end of the line customer.
Right.
So it's a
So,
risk. Those are the intangibles that I think that town council is wise to consider as well.
I mean, if you look at these options on the emergency side, to have something in place quickly that avoids an issue that you brought up, Selena, it seems like the Mars Hill agreement would be kind of a low-hanging fruit, no-brainer. There's no risk, no capital. If we had an issue next week, we could tap that. And then when we know the results of the study, we'd know where our supplemental water can come from. And then that could guide, future discussion on Woodfin and or Asheville.
So that sounds like a motion to proceed with the interlocal agreement with Mars Hill. Is that a correct?
It is.
Thank you very much, sir. Is there a second? Is there a second to that motion?
Second.
Thank you very much. What discussions do people have about the agreement, striking the agreement with Mars Hill?
I didn't see any problem, but I'm not an attorney. I rely on a town attorney for that, but it looked fair to me.
This was an interesting agreement to draft because it's very fair for both sides, because we are could either be in a position of being a receiver of emergency water or a supplier of emergency water. And so it was a very fair agreement, or at least that's the goal. I think that Mr. Bennett, the town manager for Mars Hill, saw that as well. There are a couple of just minor changes to that agreement, just kind of cleaning up a couple of typos that I found. I'm not sure whether you want to go ahead and approve an agreement tonight. That's something that we can bring back to you in either at your meeting on Monday or in December. The other part of that is that you will need to set an emergency water rate. And I think that's a conversation that Selena is having with Nathan at Mars Hill on how that is calculated and what's fair to both sides in that. So that will be, that's the second component of this. So I'm not sure whether you want to go ahead and approve the agreement tonight with some minor staff approved changes, or whether you want us to bring that back.
I think that's a minor consideration, considering the fact that we've actually never used emergency water. And if we did, it'd be for a very short time. So I wouldn't want to get hung up on the rates.
Yeah.
I agree. And also, I think the real attractive thing to this is a cost-free solution. You hardly ever get those, so.
Right. And if we have an emergency in December, then we're ready.
That's right.
Hopefully.
So,
So if we could
So-
restate the motion, just so I'm clear and the clerk is clear on what that motion is.
Sir, do you want to say that?
I would move that we move ahead with the interlocal agreement with Mars Hill and lean on staff to make the appropriate changes that are still being determined.
And Mr. Chase, you had seconded that. Do you still do so? Okay. Any other questions on this item? All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Good deal. The next item is decision on proceeding with the Woodfin interconnection. And now keep in mind with Woodfin, there's two options. One is the up to 250,000 gallons per day option, and which at 600,000, and the greater one is at 750 for 500,000 gallons per day. And attorney?
So just want to caution you that Woodfin has not committed to any of that capacity. Those were just really for discussion purposes. They've got to do that detailed hydraulic modeling before they're going to agree to any specific commitment of capacity. But I do think it's a fair conversation. Do you want, so one point is if you, even at that lower level, it gets you emergency water and supplemental water. It's not just, it wouldn't just be emergency water. But the question is, do you want to go to a more moderate level, or do you want to just maybe proceed this forward in discussions with the understanding that you would like to have emergency and supplemental water available?
I think,
Go ahead.
I think knowing what we've been through over the last 5 years, and knowing that we've been talking about water for 5 years, and I think the fact that now we have every stone has been turned over and that we actually know these answers, things that we assumed was going to be okay or not okay. The fact that there's no shovels in the ground, and we're 3 years from the last time that this council, before me and Michelle and John, made a commitment, knowing that it will take 7 to 9 years to do the Ivy River expansion if this study comes through and in our favor, knowing that we don't have a connection anywhere and we need supplemental backup plan for our people in Weaverville. So in my opinion, we should move as fast as we can for Woodfin to help us to do the analyzing, to confirm that they can sell us 500,000 gallons, and that the pumping stations and things can be done, because even if we sign on this next year, early in the spring, we're still talking 2 years before you can flip a switch. We don't have that. We don't really have that kind of time because people are standing in line wanting more water. So my motion would be, we definitely move forward with the $750,000 and the 500,000, and try to get a commitment from Woodfin so that we're in line. We're first in line. That's my motion.
Can I get a second on that?
I have some questions,
Okay.
if I could. First of all, as I understand this reading, you said 7 to 9 years. What we're getting on the data is 5 to 6 years. So that's one thing. I see this deal with Woodfin to be an insurance policy. If we move forward with building the plant, this buys us some time to get it through. Now, in that regard, the company that is going to be doing the study of the Ivy River, one of the things that it'd be interesting to see is the projected growth rate over the decade. So the first decade would indicate, if we go by the recommendations, would indicate what we would need to get. And also Woodfin's agreement with Asheville is due to expire, and I don't know what they'll do, 2029. So I see this as a short-term insurance policy, and I say short-term.
1 to 2 years.
No, well, no, till we get our plant, if we move forward with the plant. So I would be apt to go with $250,000, because that's a lot based on what our usage is today, Dale. What was our actual usage? What are we actually using today?
650,000 a day.
But it's only, so when you go by something by the pound or by the ounce, It's only $150,000 more to double your capacity.
All right.
So 600,000 versus 750.
I'm not gonna argue, I just don't see the need to go to $500,000. I don't think we'll be needing it within the scope. Now,
But when we
admittedly,
look at Gill Branch and we look at Ren's Creek,
now,
we look at apartment complexes,
if we don't find out that we can take it out, I would hold off on this one, voting it until we know what we're gonna be able to do from the Ivy River.
Yeah,
Yeah, and I think I think also it could be that, you know, what we could decide is that we establish or make a decision that we want to proceed with the connection with Woodfin. And if we can get the $250,000 and $500,000, it's really going to be dependent on the test that the attorney suggested anyway. So it could be that tonight we just say, let's proceed with making the agreement with Woodfin with details like that can be decided at a later time once we do the hydraulic studies, wherever they were that
right.
Woodfin requires.
Yeah, don't get everything ready, but don't execute it because,
don't pick the number until we.
yeah, don't sign anything because 5 weeks from now, 6 weeks from now,
That could change.
we may get some information. We don't know what we'll hear. And there may be some other options that then present themselves on expansion or it could compress. So I hear what you're saying, Michelle, or Catherine, but, you know, I also wouldn't want us to put out any money until we hear back on the study.
I'm wondering if, you know, it seems like this has been a one-sided negotiation with us kind of developing all this, is maybe the motion to go back to Woodfin and see what part of this can we create into an agreement and then come back?
So, Ms. Cordell, would you be willing to reword your motion to say that what we're directing staff to do today is to proceed with establishing an interconnection agreement with Woodfin with some of the details to be decided after the various tests?
Yes,
are
so
complete?
that all the TBD things would be answered by Woodfin. They would go ahead and do the hydraulic testing. I don't know if they need any money from us to move forward with an agreement that would be determined once they come back to us with the prices and the hydraulics.
We can find that out and keep you updated on that. That's what we're looking for.
Right, so.
That motion works as far as staff goes, I believe.
So does you understand the modification of Ms. Cordell's motion? And did that answer your questions, Mr. Chase?
Yes.
Or does that address your concern, I should say?
So.
Okay. So we have a motion to work on establishing an interconnection with Woodfin with some of the details to be worked out as tests become available. Is there a second to Ms. Cordell's motion?
So there's no amount proposed at this time in the motion?
That's correct.
Good, okay.
So is there a second to that?
I'll second it.
Necessary. Second's not necessary, but I heard it.
I'll second it anyways, but
Okay. So we have a second. Any more questions about this item? All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Good deal. And Jennifer, are you assuming a second is not necessary because it's a recommendation or because seconds really aren't necessary at all?
Rules of procedure were adopted at the last meeting to eliminate the second.
Good deal.
That's why Vice Mayor McKenna was able to click through the meeting.
Well, see, you slowed me down.
Say
man.
10 seconds.
I wasn't
per
here.
Thing, which, man, it was a thing of beauty.
So the next item we need to consider is a decision on proceeding with the Asheville interconnection. What questions or ideas do people have about that issue?
I can't see any reason to move ahead anymore with it right now, based on cost and everything.
I'm sorry, you do not see a reason to
I'm
proceed.
having a
at
hard
this
time understanding where the value would come in that right now, knowing what we know.
I think
I'm not for it.
pause until we get a response from the Ivy River Resilience.
I think that makes sense.
And
Right.
results from Woodfin.
I see some head nodding. Mr. Chase, would you like to make a motion to that effect?
Yes, I'll make a motion that we pause on the actual interconnection discussion until we get the results from the water resiliency study and any feedback from a potential Woodfin.
Is there a second to the motion?
I'll second.
Any other questions or comments about this item? If not, all those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Good deal. Thank you, guys. That was good work. I'm sorry, I think I still called for a second. It'll take a while to learn.
Take a
I'll
while.
rely on you to
We gotta
poke-
retrain you.
to poke me. Next item is there any direction we need to give staff on information we needed that we might need on any of these items really, or on a future decision about our water treatment plant expansion at this time?
Two thoughts on the study that they're going to do on the Ivy. If you could, it may be in their scope of work already, but make sure they're looking at all the measurement techniques and locations we're using today, and is that what we should be doing going forward? You know, and then also there were a couple of well-written write-ups from the Ivy River folks along the way that I think would be helpful for them to review, just to make sure that there's no stone unturned in the study. You know, if you could dig those up and forward them. That's the only thing I can think of.
Well, this group would know what they were doing more than I think the people that make the general comments, so I would be tending to trust them.
I think it ought to be an independent study. I don't think they need other people's opinions.
I would be concerned about asking them to follow along with what another group has done, simply because we would not want them feeling like town council had given them direction to follow a certain path.
Yeah, I hear what you're
And
saying.
to maintain their own objective view.
Yeah,
However, I understand what you're asking for as far as the tools, the data collection points.
yeah, if you go back, look at them and make sure it's all covered in their scope of work, that would be great.
We can do that.
Okay.
Selena or Dale, actually, maybe for both, but in their study they'll do for the Ivy River withdrawal, are they gonna come back and just say yes or no with a justification for 1.5 million gallons? Or since they're doing it, will they be able to come and say, our study shows that, not that we would change anything, study shows that you can take up to 2 million or 1.75 million gallons a day, or if it was not 1.5, but they could do 1.25 million gallons a day. You see what I'm asking?
I do. I do, Councilman. I guess I'm thinking back to when we started any of the discussions about the Ivy River. We found that we had a permit from the state that allowed the town of Weaverville up to 4 million gallons of withdrawal from the river. And we based our 1.5 million expansion to be added to the current 1.5 million to say we're permitted up to 4, but we're proposing to pull out 3. So I would imagine what the CDM Smith folks will do is realize that is a valid state issued approval for us to do that. But I would say they would set that over to the side, and they're going to use the data, the USGS data, the data that we provide, the data that you get from the Department of Environmental Quality, USGS, all the people, and they're going to conduct their own study of the conditions and environmental issues that are involved with the river, and come up with a completely independent number that will say, based on this point at our intake on the Ivy River, and based on all the documentations and data that we can resolve and find and use, then here's your number. And so I don't think that they'll be looking at a specific, yes, you can pull 1.5 million, or no, you can't do it. I think they're going to say, here's how much you can.
Good, because if it's like a greater number than that, we've got a comfort factor in.
Right.
And it, you know, we've said several times that 4 million is, the state said that's how much water can be pulled out of the river at that point. Doesn't say it's 100% guaranteed to the town of Weaverville, because it's sort of first come, first served as far as the withdrawal amounts that are permitted at that point. So I think doing this study is a fine idea in terms of being able to get an update to that number that was done back in the late 80s, very early 90s, when the decision was made by the town to go to that.
Thank you.
You know, just
Yeah.
This is just an observation or a thought. You guys have done a great job on this stuff. I mean, when I look at what we were talking about a year ago, I felt like we got this responsibility, but it really didn't feel like a business that we were making objective decisions. And now we've got all these options in place. We've got relationships with other municipalities. We've got numbers backing it up. It's pretty amazing what y'all have done in a year. And thank you for that. And I would say, even after we make these decisions, we should be keeping this dialogue going into the future because, we're going to need each other's help, these towns, and, this is going to always be changing.
That's
So,
a very good
thank
point.
you.
That's a very good point, sir. Thank you. And I do want to commend the staff too, that basically all I did was have meetings with people and say, can you do this for us? And then they had to take all this huge data and try and compile it and put it into these cool little graphs and stuff, which made it readable for you all. So thank you all for all that detailed and tedious work.
But we will have a foundation by probably February or March, so we will know whether or not we want to go and expand the plant. It shouldn't be any more delays, I can see.
The study should take 5 weeks whenever and presumably they can get started pretty soon.
5 weeks, they will have the information to us in 5 weeks. And then I think am I thinking 2 weeks probably? We've got like 2 weeks to review and see if there's anything missing, if we feel like there's data that they didn't collect or whatever, and submit that back to them. And then my assumption is they could make a quick turnaround and give us the final report soon thereafter.
Okay, good. Are there any other questions or directions we want to give staff at this point, folks?
So we'd be looking at that report, what, January?
I would say January at the earliest, January, February probably. Assuming they can start soon.
I mean, we'll go ahead and execute the contract tomorrow.
Okay.
We really appreciate all the work.
Yeah, I was impressed when I read the packet this week.
These folks have, and Jennifer and Tanya Hyden over there have done a fantastic job and really kept it. It's been great because we've been able to keep open minds and look at all the details and learn a whole lot. It's been good. We've had a lot of really good cooperation from the other jurisdictions as well as the Woodland Water District.
And I think it's good to note that we started this process in June, and on 7 recommendations, I think, and we have made significant progress on almost all of those. The rate study will come, but obviously the rate study is kind of dependent on the conclusion of these other matters. So I think significant progress has been made in a pretty timely fashion too. So good on us.
Oh, one other thought, on conservation, you mentioned in that section, it's the rate study. Didn't we talk a while back ago about the idea of just educating citizenry on conservation measures we could be doing all the time anyway? Or am I remembering that properly?
No, we did talk about that. We haven't, I will admit that we haven't really had time to dive into that in depth, but we do some of that through the e-focus, trying to encourage some conservation that way. Also, Tanya and her staff have been talk to folks regularly, daily, about how they can conserve when they call in about water bills and that kind of thing. So we're doing a lot of that on the periphery or in the background, but we can certainly come up with some more, I would say, targeted articles to put out and maybe get some help from the community to help us.
Okay.
To that distributor.
Yeah, we were in New Mexico last week, and my wife and I am talking to a guy out there about, because, they have an arid climate, and so their water is always an issue. And he told me, yeah, we just, we're always kind of in a semi-drought, so we're always conserving. It's just like baked into our culture, and it's no big deal to us now. And I think, even though we've been blessed that we've got a lot of resources in this area, that could change someday. And so, it might be good to
And
prime the
even,
pump.
and even if it didn't change, conservation is the most cost-effective way to manage your resources anyway. So it's something we should be doing. And I think including some type of education pieces when we do the rate study, including that as part of that process would be important. And just to give you a little update on the rate study, we have to have a rate study done before next summer anyway, for some state reason. I forget what it is, Jennifer. But obviously included in that will be the revised rate study, or the revised rate structure, excuse me.
So I think what you're referring to is the system development fee
That's it.
study, which is separate from
Right.
the actual water rate study.
Right. But possibly could be associated with each other anyway.
There's certainly some data that will be needed for both, for sure.
Good deal. Anything else that needs to be brought before this body this evening, ladies and gentlemen? If not, we're adjourned. Thank you very much, guys. Heavy lifting tonight.
Still in meeting.
Well,
Huh?